All right. Now it seems that the microphone is working. Okay. Welcome everyone to another live stream of character sketch of Vinayak Savarkar. All right. This name already gives, the cringe to a lot of people, but we are here to correct that narrative, correct that false impression that people have inside their head about Savarkar. Okay, just as any public figure, he was also prone to errors. He was also prone to make mistakes that make him human. All right, and let's get straight into it. So far, we have reached a point where he was residing with other people in the India House. Okay, India House was a hostel, sort of a hostel that was started by Shyamji Krishna Varma. Again, if you want to know a little bit background about Shyamji Krishna Varma, you should refer to episode 2 of this series of character sketch. All right. So here is what is every for every character. All right, there are times when people break their character due to expediencies of time. All right, there are certain demands that time places on us where we are supposed to leave the mold of our character and do things that don't really resonate with the tendencies and the core of your character. Vinayak was no different. He had to do things, he had to eat things that we're going to discover in this episode that he does, and that will leave him vulnerable to certain judgments. Okay, we can judge him as much as we want, but just like every other historical figure, he has his own flaws, he has his own strength points, but uh, all right. Without a further ado, let's get into it. Now, what India House managed to do in UK, more specifically in London, was it was a camp. You can imagine a sort of a base camp where all the other intellectual people, okay, all the other intellectual youngsters in those times, if people in Bharat, if they saw potential, okay, this person would be useful to further the political cause of Bharat. Okay, they were sent to UK, they were sent to England to study. There is also some degree of coloniality at play over here because the generation of the 1800s and of the 1900s, they were convinced, and they were not at fault, they were convinced that it is UK indeed that's the center of knowledge. All right, because they had, since they were here and they were ruling over us at that particular moment in history, we had been led to believe that they had mastered the art of civilization. You know, so yes, at that point in history, we were convinced that it was indeed the English way of life that was, that was the way forward. And yeah, so there are a few individuals that Vinayak manages to, meet, and one specific individual is VVS Iyer. Okay, if you need his full name was Varahaneri Venkatesa Subramaniam Iyer. Okay, he was born in Trichinopoly in the Madras Presidency. All right. Now he had potential. Some the near and dear ones of VVS Iyer, they saw some potential in him. Again, he went to UK to study their ways, and yep. So again, one of the things that drew people towards India House in London was the vegetarian diet. Okay, increasingly, I would say people in this part of the world, increasingly they have vegetarian tendencies. Okay, uh, now I'm going to make a rather politically incorrect statement. Okay, um, I don't know where did this myth or where did this narrative start from, but it is largely believed that the pagans or the nationals of Bharat, they are largely vegetarian. Okay, which is clearly not the case. Okay, we are different in every sense possible, and food is no exception. Okay, you will see down south people of the priestly class, they consume beef. Okay, if you go towards the northeastern part of Bharat, you will see people over there, they consume pork. Okay, So food, I guess, food is rather treated in a recommendatory way, meaning there are no fixed lines drawn that if you belong to so and so class, you are only supposed to eat so and so things and you are not supposed to eat them. Okay. So yes, this is again a misconstrued narrative, and I would also urge people of this country to sit down and have a frank discussion about this, because food is something that had a recommendatory nature in our faith, that is the pagan faith of Bharat. Okay, it was never strict lines. There were no strict lines in stone that you're only supposed to eat so and so things. But having said that, this fellow VVS Iyer, he had traveled to London to study, and his need, okay, his adherence to vegetarian principles, that thing drew him towards India House, because that was the only place where majority of the people from Bharat were staying. And it's rather a human tendency to seek out similar people. Okay. So he went to India House primarily for the goal of having the options of vegetarian food. Okay. There he meets Vinayak. There he meets Savarkar, and VVS Iyer. Okay, he meets Savarkar, and this is Savarkar describing Iyer in his memoirs. Okay, these are his words. Let us read. Okay, what he writes about Iyer. So in 1907, these are his words. In 1907, one day the maid servant at the famous India House in London handed a visiting card to us as we came downstairs to dine and told us the gentleman was waiting in the drawing room. Presently, the door was flung open, and a gentleman neatly dressed in European costume and inclined to be fashionable warmly shook hands with us. Here Vinayak is describing that VVS Iyer was neatly dressed in European costume. As you can see, increasingly, the nationals of Bharat who went over there to study, they were increasingly adopting the European way of life. Okay, this again stands testimony to the fact that we are highly adaptive. The adaptive nature in our character is inherent in our civilization. Wherever the people of Bharat will go, they will increasingly adapt and ingratiate themselves with the people of the native land. Okay, they would want to not completely adopt their culture, but they would adopt, rather they would accommodate certain characteristics of that particular land wherein they are migrating to. Okay, this is something that differentiates us with migrants from other countries, that is migrants from Muslim countries of West Asia. Whenever they go to European countries, they would rather impose their own cultural and traditional values on them. Whereas if you compare them with the nationals of Bharat, when they go to other countries, they would accommodate the spirit, they would accommodate the cultural traditions of their home country. Okay, this is something that separates us from other masses of migration, migrators. And this is something that has enabled us to go further ahead and succeed and lead foreign countries from the positions of head of state. Rishi Sunak, for one example. Okay, you'll never see a Chinese, you'll never see a Muslim migrant from other countries leading the home country of the migrants. Okay, it rarely happens, but there are multiple examples of people of Bharatiya origin, going up to the post of prime ministers and presidents. Okay, this is again something for you to ponder about. Why exactly is this happening? All right. So yes, VVS Iyer, he was neatly dressed in European costume. Again, let's come back to Savarkar's own words. He told us he had been a pleader in Rangoon and had come over to England to qualify himself as a full-fledged barrister. Now here also you might think, why are increasingly people coming over to UK to study and become barrister? There is a reason for this, because they had realized British, they increasingly relied on courts of law to exact, or to mm, to play this game of vendetta. Whenever they were faced with a hurdle, faced with a revolutionary that they could not you know uh, that they could not, I would say, were when they were not able to nab him and put him in jail, they would rely on courts, because court was something that they that ensured that the British got their way. And the native, the nationals, and the pagans of Bharat, they had realized that if you could prove your innocence in a court of law, indeed you can, overpower the British. And increasingly, that is why you will see that many of the people from Bharat, they would go to England to study law. Okay, and also it was also one of the paying lucrative career options that was there in front of them. All right, so let's finish this quickly. This is Savarkar writing about Iyer. He was past 30 and seemed a bit agreeably surprised to find us so young. He assured us of his intention to study English music, and even assured us that he was keen to get a few lessons in dancing as well. We, as usual, entered our mild protest against thus dissipating the energy of our youth in light hearted pastimes when momentous issues hung in the balance. The gentleman, unconvinced through impressed look, the though impressed, took our leave, promising to continue to call upon us every now and then. He was VVS Iyer. Okay, this tells you that people increasingly going over there, they were rather increasingly based on adopting the European culture. Okay, there is one interesting phrase that Vikram Sampath uses in his book was this is again, I would say, Iyer. Okay, this is again Iyer writing. I will have nothing to do with that firebrand. Meaning, he was convinced. He was convinced that Savarkar indeed was somebody who was increasingly revolutionary in his outlook. And VVS Iyer, after one meet, he was convinced that I was surely not going to work with Savarkar again. Okay, but as the fate would have it, there is a very interesting phrase that Vikram Sampath uses in his book, that is serendipitously worked together. Okay, as universe would have it, as fate would have it, Savarkar and Iyer, they end up working together. Okay, whereas clearly Iyer was reluctant in working with Savarkar. All right, so this assured that they both kept on working together in courts together, in classes together, and hence they both kept coming closer together, and this was the start of friendship. Okay, so initially it is stated that Iyer, he did not wanted to work with Savarkar, clearly because when you meet somebody who has diametrically opposite views to yours, initially there would be initial reluctance on your side to work with them. Okay, but like everyone else, the persistence of Savarkar managed to bring down those defenses. Serendipity also had some role to play when it came to this camaraderie between Iyer and Savarkar. Okay, so there are many other people. Okay, there is one more person that came in contact with Savarkar at the India House. That person was MP Tirumala Acharya. He was a Tamil scholar, journalist, and a patriot. Okay, he also had this revolutionary leanings, because it's no surprise. Okay, majority of the youth, they were largely leaning towards the revolutionary sides because of the importance of the moderates in the Congress. Okay, they were not satisfied with the way things were progressing back home, and hence they had to resort to going to London to study. And when increasing number of youngsters were coming to London to study, they were meeting. Okay, they were collaborating, they were meeting together at India House, thanks to Shyamji Krishna Verma. One such scholar from Tamil Nadu was MP Tirumala Acharya. Okay, now at India House, Acharya too came under Vinayak's spell, became an ardent follower, and here is what he had to write about Savarkar. Okay, Tirumala Acharya writes this about Savarkar. This will give you some insight into who exactly was Savarkar, how to shape the character of Savarkar in this character sketch. So let's see what Tirumala Acharya had to write. These are his words. These are not my words. Okay. His personal charm was such that a mere shake hand could convert men such as VVS Iyer and Hardayal. Not only convert, but even bring out the best of them. Sincere men always became attached to him, whether they agreed with or differed from him. Not only men in ordinary walks of life, but even those aspiring to high offices recognized the purity of purpose in him. Although they were poles apart from him and deadly opponents as regard his political objectives, they even opened their purse for his propaganda. That means Savarkar had a rare tact in dealing with men of every variety. Savarkar's austerity was itself a discipline to others, which easygoing people hated and shunned. England was a country for amusement, and most people wanted to make the most of it. Okay, here also he is um, stating the fact that yes, Savarkar had some inherent quality in him, inherent magnetic quality in him that drew people towards him. Okay, his commitment to his goal was something that inspired others to do the same. Okay, these are his words, these are not mine. Again, these are the words of an individual. You cannot take them as something as a writing in the stone, but it has to give you some perspective into the character that was Savarkar. Okay, he had this magnetic quality in him that drew people towards him. He had a tact with words that convinced people to the extent that they were willing to spend money, for the cause of Savarkar. The mere fact that he was in India House at the mercy of the scholarship of Shyamji Krishna Verma, and the fact that it was indeed Bal Gangadhar Tilak who wrote a letter of recommendation for Savarkar speaks volumes about the content of his character. Okay, so yes, he had this luring tendency, he had this seductive way of convincing people and drawing people towards him. Okay, uh, next up was JC Mukherjee. Okay, JC Mukherjee was one Bengali. Okay, he was also earlier he was of Gandhian persuasion. He was very much influenced about the political philosophy of Gandhi, but when he met Savarkar, his thoughts completely changed. Okay, his thoughts completely changed. He used to write a daily column in Gandhi's paper, that is Indian Opinion, but he ended up coming to the side of Savarkar. Again, this speaks volumes about his tact of handling people. All right, one very interesting case that happened. Okay, now this might get a little controversial, but you'll have to look at it in the light of the literary evidence that is available. Okay, there were also Muslim students in the India House. Okay, um, one such student was Abdullah Suhrawardi. Okay, Abdullah Suhrawardi, he was also there in India House. Again, since he was staying with Savarkar, he wasn't immune to his charms. Okay, but there was somebody called Ziauddin. Okay, there was somebody called Ziauddin who was writing letters to Suhrawardi on a daily basis, and one such letter he writes this. Okay, these are the words of one individual fellow who goes by the name of Ziauddin, and he writes to Suhrawardi, who was staying at India House with Savarkar. And if you think rationally, if somebody was staying with Savarkar, they could not have stayed immune to his ways and his charms. Okay, so let's see what this particular individual, that is Ziauddin, who was going to become a vice chancellor of Aligarh Muslim University back home in Bharat, how was he convincing Suhrawardi to stay away from Savarkar? Okay, again, that would may want to make that would make you think, why exactly was Ziauddin telling Suhrawardi to stay away from Savarkar? Let's read it in his own words. Okay. I understand that Mr. Krishna Verma has founded a society called India Home Rule Society, and you are also one of its vice presidents. Do you really believe that the Muslims will be profited if home rule be granted to India? There is no doubt that his home rule is decidedly against the Aligarh policy. What I call the Aligarh policy is really the policy of all the Muslims generally, of the Muslims of Upper India particularly. Okay, here is saying we have also covered this sufficiently in our Unlearning the Falsehoods theory, meaning the Muslim cause, the reason why the theory of two nation found resonance and currency with most of the Muslims of Bharat was because indeed they were two separate nations. They were skeptical and even scared to a certain extent because they had foreseen by the activities of revolutionaries that one day indeed the British would leave Bharat. Okay, and the thought of a power vacuum in Bharat scared them. Meaning, if indeed British leave the position of power, who would occupy it? Obviously the pagans, obviously the nationals of Bharat. Okay, now this scared the Muslims, meaning because the Alavi, Barelvi, Deobandis, and all these people, they had managed to convince all the converted Muslims of Bharat that indeed their interests were different from the pagans, simply because that they had converted. Okay, now this ideology was further propagated by Sayyid Ahmad Khan. All right, the multiple speeches out there, you can refer it on the internet. These things widely exist on the internet. Okay, you don't need to take my word for it. So here he is clearly stating that there is no doubt that this home rule is decidedly against the Aligarh policy. What is the Aligarh policy? That the Muslims are different from the pagans. Okay, this is Ziauddin writing in his own words. This is not me saying it. All right. Yes. Now there is very interesting phrase that Savarkar often used. Okay, peaceful evolution had a meaning and a sense. Peaceful revolution had neither, because that is Savarkar's individual opinion that there is no such thing as a peaceful revolution. Okay, if you indeed want a revolution, you need to have this affinity towards violence. You need to have this tendency and the audacity and effrontery to present uh, present a formidable opponent to the current ruling regime or the current order. That is what Savarkar thinks, that a revolution can never be peaceful. All right, and to this very end, where did these thoughts come about in the minds of Savarkar? Okay, I have always been advocating this, an appeal to reason. Don't believe something just because our history textbooks tell us. Don't believe something just because some politician has said that in any of the public rallies that politician undertakes. Okay, look for a reason. Why exactly would somebody believe that? Okay, Savarkar from his early childhood was inspired by one of the Italian revolutionaries who goes by the name of Mazzini. That is Giuseppe or Giuseppe Mazzini, however the Italians say it. I apologize if I'm wrong. But there was one Italian revolutionary that inspired Savarkar, and that was the source and the orifice of the revolutionary thoughts that Savarkar had. That particular individual was Giuseppe Mazzini. Okay. Now, why is this important? Because, and this goes true for me as well, and this would go true for many of you as well. Initially, it is very luring to be a communist and to be a Marxist, because when you are in your adulthood, okay, idealism is something that you want to stick to. Everything should belong to the people. There should not be too much concentration of wealth into certain individuals. Okay, because you are idealistic, you are right out of the college, these things make sense to you. But as and when you get real life experiences, you think that no, okay, communism and Marxism will inevitably lead a society towards failure. Okay, and there will be people out there who will say that no, then how do you justify China's existence as a communist country, and how has China managed to flourish so much? Okay, what people don't realize is China has some, like, they don't advertise themselves as purely and absolutely communist country. They call themselves as Chinese communism with Chinese tendencies or Chinese characteristics. Okay, so yes, initially when everybody is out of the college, out of the school, Marxism and communism is something that lures you towards it. Okay, but as and when you grow up, you realize that world is indeed not a fair place, and you cannot stick to the ideals of Marxism and communism. So such was the case with Savarkar. Initially he started off as a communist or a Marxist. Again, that is a speculation or an assumption. Nowhere in his memoirs does he mention that he was a communist or he was a Marxist, but it is a rather safe assumption that we can take. All right. But he was largely influenced by the revolutionary works of Mazzini, that is Giuseppe Mazzini. He writes that extensively. Okay. To give you a certain background about who actually was Mazzini, Mazzini was a Italian revolutionary who advocated an armed revolution against the Austrian Empire. He was, trying to unite the Italian Empire. All right, trying to unify Italy into in 1861 from a conglomerate of disparate states ruled by the Austrian Empire. Okay, so yes, Mazzini, he opened a revolutionary society that goes by the name of Young Italy. Okay, now Savarkar's efforts, because since he was somebody who was advocating this revolutionary cause, okay, he set up his own revolutionary societies that goes by the name of Mitra Mela and Abhinav Bharat. So he organized these revolutionary societies and on such and such lines. Okay, now one very important thing that you'll find moderates discussing was, an armed revolution is something that Savarkar advocated. Okay, not not very explicitly. You can understandably say from the experiences of Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Okay, even writing or advocating, Swaraj was interpreted and misconstrued as sedition by the British because they were really afraid of these ideas and these opinions getting out. What will these things do? These things will for the lack of a better word, indoctrinate the youth into thinking that armed revolution was the only way. Okay, um, this is we are talking about the 1900s. This is we are talking about the 1900s. All right. uh, so when somebody from the um, somebody asked, okay, that Italians had weapons when it came to organizing an armed revolution against the Austrian Empire. Okay, so and how do you reckon would the people in Bharat would have an armed revolution against the British? So when Savarkar was asked this question, this was his reply. Okay, these are his words, these are not mine. This is something that Savarkar wrote in his memoirs, and I'm reading his words. Okay, the arms borne out by the soldiers under the British command are our arms. True, our Indian soldiers are illiterate, but they too must have some desire to make our country independent. Spread the fire of movement for freedom among them, and see how same soldiers turn against the English with the same arms and ammunitions. Okay, these are his words, not mine. And you'll see that uh, going further in 1857 and even after that, the soldier mutiny was something that the British feared. Okay, that was something that could earn them freedom, and hence they were the ones who came up with increasingly this policy of the increasing attitude of the British towards not giving weapons to the pagan soldiers. This would inevitably end up getting or spreading this revolutionary fervor amongst the soldiers. All right. Now, what happened was Savarkar, being in London, he wished to write. Okay, this is something that you'll see very commonly amongst people of high intellectual. They would either be poets, they would either be writers. Okay, they would have this inherent desire to express their thoughts in writing and spread it amongst the people. So Savarkar was not no different. Okay, he was increasingly interested in Mazzini, Giuseppe Mazzini, the Italian revolutionary, and he wanted to write a biography. So he could write it in Marathi, send it across to Bharat, and let people know about these things. So there is something that you need to keep in mind is British were making deliberate efforts, okay, to not let people of Bharat know about these things, because if they come into knowledge of these things, they would organize themselves politically. Okay, political union or political unity was something that the British wished that the pagans should not achieve. If indeed they end up achieving, all right, it would be the end of British rule. All right. So yes, what happened was Vinayak, he wanted to write the biography. He, got in touch with a lot of people, and he went to libraries. He read 6 volumes of the biography of Mazzini that was there in the British libraries. He managed to write, he managed to write the biography of Mazzini and send it across to Bharat. Okay, because since he knew, okay, since he knew that these things would motivate and aspire the people of Bharat to demand their own revolution, okay, so he wanted to make people aware. Okay, now here is what he writes. Okay, these are the Vinayak's words in his memoirs. Okay, secret societies must work on two fronts: propaganda and action. Some work has to be done in secret and some in the open. Okay, again he is writing about how to bring about a revolution, how to politically unite people. These are his words. These are his words. These are not my words. Okay, it is impossible to regain independence without resorting to force of arms. However, it is also essential to carry out propaganda by peaceful means to prepare the masses for their part in the revolution. Okay, you need to lay the intellectual path, okay, for the masses to be convinced, okay, to contribute to the revolutionary cause. Like I said, majority of the pagans in Bharat during the 1800s and the 1900s, they were illiterate. They were not politically conscious. It was only the Congress who got the, you know, who had the luxury to get the Congress membership. Okay, the people who were elites, people who had the time, luxury, and resources to afford an English education and then gain membership of Congress and then fight, uh, you know, or get the membership of Congress. And on top of that, Congress had made it mandatory that those who got the membership of Congress, they had to, you know, give a written undertaking that loyalty to the British was paramount. They will fight to gain a dominion within the British Empire, not for complete and utter independence. Okay. So, yeah, this is how Congress was established. It is essential to join forces with the enemies of Britain in Asia and Europe and sympathetic elements in America. Guerrilla tactics must be used to attack British sources of power, its centers, its officers, individually and in groups, to induce Indians employed by British, such as soldiers, to rise in revolt, to rise whenever there was a war between Britain and other foreign power, to carry out revolutionary activities one after other. That was my plan of action. Okay. Now, this thing was not known to the people of Bharat. Okay, that British, they were managing the colony, that is, they were managing us, that is Bharat, but they were also undertaking, war campaigns back home in Europe. So there was an element of vulnerability. There was a chink in their armor. There was something that you could capitalize upon, and that is what Savarkar thought of. Okay, if Britain was, since he was in London, so he was pretty much aware about the political happenings, what exactly was going there, what Britain was doing in other colonies as well. So since he was aware, people thought that, okay, since they were, waging wars against other colonies, there is some room, okay, there is some room for maneuver for Bharat to fight this, even though we do not have weapons. But at least what we can do is develop an intellectual background for people to realize, okay, that you are not a subjugated country. Okay, next he writes, okay, and I used to argue my case in open, but still keeping within the legal limits. I was surprised to find that Mazzini had followed the same path for liberation of his country. Okay. That could also be one of the reasons why Savarkar advocated the same template that Mazzini used in Italy for Bharat. Okay. I realized that if my friends and followers were to read Mazzini's articles, that will increase their faith in our methods enormously. And in 1906, I and my colleagues in Abhinav Bharat were hardly 20 to 22 years of age. Our leaders, both moderates and militants, dismissed our activities as childish. Okay, this is something that is, you might have also heard this in popular culture. Every genius initially is ridiculed. Okay, so since the moderates, majority of the moderates and moderate membership in Congress was largely elders, meaning they were people beyond the age of 50 or 60. Okay, so these new methods that the revolutionary had appeared to them as childish, meaning these things will not succeed. Okay, so that is what Savarkar is writing in his memoirs, that initially people dismissed off his methods as childish. Okay, these things won't work, but clearly it worked for Italy. Okay, that is what Savarkar was drawing out, that if it has worked for one country, there is no reason why it could not work for Bharat. Okay, they were the leaders of our society at that time, but then Mazzini and his fellow revolutionaries were similarly ridiculed as childish and absurd by contemporary elders in Italian society in the 1830s. Mazzini had replied to such ridicule in his articles. The funny thing was that in 1906, people like Mazzini and Garibaldi, he was another Italian revolutionary, were regarded as great patriots by Indian leaders without realizing that in their days, Mazzini and Garibaldi too were being branded as foolhardy and childish. Now compare this with the narrative that in our country, uh, revolutionaries were branded as. There are political factions who have gone as far as branding Bhagat Singh as a terrorist. Okay. Mazzini's articles were going to make firm our plans of action and induce faith among people of Bharat in our methods. Okay, this is something that Savarkar had stumbled upon. Okay, now since he read this all and he realized, oh, this is something that could be replicated in my country as well. Okay, so he read 6 volumes of biography of Mazzini, 6 rather lengthy volumes of, and initially only 3 of them were available. He requested the libraries in Britain to make available the other 3 as well, and he was obliged. He read all the 6 in record time, and yeah, all those 6, and he abstracted the knowledge out of all the 6 biographies of Mazzini, wrote a 300-page essay. Okay, a 300-page essay, and that was named as Politics and Autobiography of Joseph Mazzini. Why did he do this? Because he felt a sense of duty towards his civilization. He wrote these articles, translated them in Marathi, and now he had to send that back home. Why? Because he had a sense of duty. That is something that is, you will find majorly missing in the youth of our country these days. Okay, you'll find people who will stand up for their rights, walk down the streets in form of a protest to demand their rights. But this sense of duty is something that is missing largely in our youth. Okay, so this has to be inculcated. That is why what Savarkar did, what he did, he translated the whole thing, abstracted what could have been important for Bharat at that time, wrote it and sent it across to Bharat to print and publish it, so people could know, okay, that it is indeed possible to get rid of the British rule. Because by now people had accepted their I would say destiny. That is something that is inherent in our nature. If something bad happens to us, we accept it in the form of a stroke of destiny. And in a way, that is right. I'm not opposing that. That has been the way of our life since centuries and centuries, since the dawn of time. But what I'm saying is, okay, what Vinayak saw was light at the end of the cave, light at the end of the tunnel. That is, that there is something indeed that we could do. Majority of the pagans in our country, when the British were ruling, they were living under this assumption that there is no way you could get rid of the British. Okay, we had exaggerated in our minds that, oh, British were a superior race, and we cannot get rid of them. But I guess Savarkar saw that there is indeed a way to get rid of them. You know, now what happens is, uh, nobody was ready to publish his book, because nobody was risk the wrath of the British Empire, because what the British did was, they were very liberal in their interpretation of sedition. Anything that you write that goes against the rule of the Majesty's government in Bharat, they would qualify it as sedition, and they would put you in jail. They would send you to Rangoon, Myanmar somewhere, and then you will rot in that jail. Tilak is one example. Tilak had spent 7 years in Rangoon, uh, for sedition, for some essays that he wrote as a response to the British government. But that is, again, we are also going to do a character sketch of Bal Gangadhar Tilak as well. But right now we are going to focus on Savarkar. Okay. Now he sends this manuscript across to Bharat, from London to Bharat. In a way, he might have had some way. Okay, and he sends it across. Now what happened was, Baba Rao, okay, the British, they were keeping a close eye on Savarkar because they had their doubts. They knew that this person, okay, could be danger. All right, it is not a gun wielding soldier that is the threat to the authority of the state. It is the pen wielding revolutionary that is a threat to the state. Okay, because it is easy to deal with a gun wielding revolutionary. You could simply just arrest them or kill them. But what about a pen wielding revolutionary? Okay, I'm not a big fan of Karl Marx. Okay, but I would really want to quote an example over here. Okay, the Communist Manifesto that Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, both of them, wrote. Okay, that overhauled the political landscape of Europe. Okay, that was a pivoting movement in the political history of Europe, that brought out this idea of communism, and that completely changed the political landscape. Okay, so without firing a single bullet, Karl Marx had managed to completely change the political landscape. Okay, so you can indeed fathom the importance that revolutionary writings have, and you can see why exactly the British were scared of Savarkar. Okay, so he had sent across Mazzini's autobiography back home. Now he had sent it to Baba Rao, who was Savarkar's brother. Okay, 2,000 copies of the book were printed. Okay, now after these books were selling, obviously the British were going to get aware. Okay, how exactly, who exactly had written this, how exactly is this getting published. Okay, they had to frame laws after laws to curb the press, because these things were dangerous. Okay, once when an idea gets out, okay, it is very it's impossible to halt its spread. Okay, you can put that person in jail. Okay, but how will you contain the spread of idea that the person stands for? Okay, so now Savarkar had opened the floodgates. Okay, people were reading his work, and that is something that the British were scared. Okay, they had to somehow put this cat bag in the bag. Okay, so here is something that EB Reichs. Okay, EB Reichs was the Advocate General for the Judicial Department, Government of Bombay. That is what he writes when he comes into this knowledge that the essays written by Savarkar on Mazzini that had been sent across to Bharat from London were printed and published, and people were reading that work. This is what Reichs writes. Okay. On the summary before me, I have no doubt that the preface was written with a directly seditious intention, and that almost every native of this country who reads it will know this. But at the same time, it is very difficult to point out to a single line of it which can be said to be directed against the British government. Okay. So Savarkar had written the autobiography in such a way that it would communicate a message to the natives of Bharat. okay, that indeed revolution was possible. Look what Mazzini did in Italy. This is something we can replicate this template. Okay, but after reading it, this British authority was not able to point to any single line of that literature that Savarkar had written that could directly be linked to sedition. Sedition meaning disaffection or, revolting against the British Empire. Okay, but still, the British were not willing to, risk it, and hence they banned that book in July 1907. They were like, no, 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 we cannot have this. You will have to ban this book. So the British banned Savarkar's first book in 1906. Okay, now this is where the interesting episode starts. Two people who were going to shape the political ideology and the political arena of Bharat were going to meet. Two diametrically opposite personalities. One was Mohandas Gandhi, another one was Savarkar. Okay, our political narrative usually, pits them both against each other. Okay, how interesting would be to see these two individuals meeting, having a conversation. That is something that is going to happen in India House in London. Okay, now Mohandas Gandhi in 1893, okay, he was in South Africa. Okay, he was a professional litigator, a barrister educated in London, and he was in London on behalf of one of his clients fighting a case in London. Okay, now since he was in London, he knew about India House, a hostel that was set up by Shyamji Krishna Verma. Now he goes to India House. Okay, just or that describe his meeting with Gandhi, right? But there is one interesting anecdote about him, and you know there was one interesting anecdote about him and Savarkar that they met in India House. All right. So let's. But before that, before talking about Savarkar meeting Gandhi, let's look at the background. On what background was Gandhi meeting Savarkar in London? Okay, this is a very important meeting, and I want you guys to get, all the contextual background there is. Yes, all right. Now, the British, they were fighting multiple wars in South Africa. Okay. Left, right, and center, they were massacring the Zulu inhabitants. They were killing people. Okay. There was something called as Bambatha Rebellion that was going on. Now, despite despite British handling these rebellions with an iron fist, meaning killing people left, right, and center, Gandhi was still in support of the British. Okay, he was very much steadfast in his support towards the British. This is something that you need to keep in mind. And Gandhi was criticized fervently by Shyamji Krishna Verma in one of his articles. Okay, Shyamji Krishna Verma had started this print media that goes by the name of Indian Sociologist. Okay, Gandhi was criticized for his pro-British stand on these conflicts that were going home back home in South Africa. Okay, that is something that Shyamji Krishna Verma had criticized him, and Gandhi has on record, said things that should not have been said. Okay, now I'm going to read Gandhi's own words that he wrote. Okay, let's read what Gandhi had to say about the natural inhabitants of South Africa and British. Okay, since these two people were the ones who were uh, indulged in a fight. Okay, so let's see what Gandhi had to say. Ours is one continual struggle against degradation sought to be inflicted upon us by the Europeans, who desire to degrade us to the level of the raw kafir, whose occupation is hunting and whose sole ambition is to collect a certain number of cattle to buy a wife with and then pass his life in indolence and nakedness. Kafirs are, as a rule, uncivilized. They are troublesome, very dirty, and live almost like animals. This is Gandhi speaking about the natural inhabitants of South Africa. He's calling them Kafirs. Okay. Yep. This is a very controversial statement that, Gandhi has made. All right. So, yes, in this background, Gandhi enters the India House and meets Vinayak. He meets Vinayak. When he goes in India House, he sees Vinayak cooking prawns. Okay. Now, Chit Pavan Brahmins, they are usually said to be vegetarians. Now, he saw Vinayak cooking prawns and fish when Gandhi saw Vinayak, and he was appalled and taken back. Okay. Now, like I said in the beginning of this video, there are flaws that historical personalities have, and you have to look at the wholesome character that they present. You cannot just simply cherry pick something out of their life and paint the entire picture in that light. Okay. So yes, Savarkar had taken to eating meat while he was in London. Okay. That again stands testimony to the fact that indeed there was this mindset that the youth of Bharat had during that time, that you were supposed to adopt European cultures. Okay. So he had adopted the European culture. He was eating prawns and fish, and that is something that uh, Gandhi was surprised to see. Okay. Now, when Vinayak offered these things to Gandhi, Gandhi said, okay, Gandhi refused. Gandhi refused that no, I am not supposed to eat these things. At that time, he claimed to be strictly vegetarian. Okay. Now, it would be interesting to know what was Vinayak's response to this. Okay. Vinayak responded, well, if you cannot eat with us, how on earth are you going to work with us? Moreover, this is just boiled fish, while we want people who are ready to eat the British alive. Okay, this was a short interaction that went on between Gandhi and Savarkar, and yep, this shows that there was some competition. I would say not exactly competition, but there was some friction between Gandhi and Savarkar. All right. By this time, the Scotland Yard was pretty much aware that Savarkar was in town, and you need to keep an eye on him. In their own words, he was a firebrand character. Okay. So, yes, Scotland Yard wired messages to inform the Criminal Intelligence Department in India that a considerable number of pamphlets had been posted to India to be carried in native newspapers. Okay, this is something that Savarkar was doing while he was in England. Okay, he was writing many articles since he was exposed to the political landscape of London, and in those times. Okay, he was seeing things differently. He had a different view into things that people back home in Bharat did not. Okay, so what was he doing? He's articulating his opinion based on what he was given, or based on what his exposure was. Okay, he was taking in these things, he was putting it down in writing, he is sending it back to Bharat for people to know. Why? Because only after people political aware, making people politically conscious, then you can churn up a revolution. Okay. But the British, the Scotland Yard, the police, the Criminal Intelligence Department in India, they all were aware that these things were going on. Okay. So yeah, these things were going on. Now, what was happening? Okay, what was happening was in 1857. There is much literature out there about 1857, since it was called, the first revolt of independence that Bharat had. Okay, indeed it was, indeed it was. But Savarkar, Vinayak Savarkar, he was in London at that time. Okay, and what was he seeing? Okay, the events of 1857 were interpreted by the British in a different light. Okay, they were glorifying the soldiers who had managed to kill the natives. We have covered this in one of our episodes of Unlearning the Falsehoods, wherein you will see that people and their heads were tied to the cannons, and the cannons were, triggered. They were shot, they were hanged in public, and whatnot. Okay. So the people, the British people, the native British people, they were glorifying this behavior. Okay. They were celebrating it as something that they had managed to come out victorious from. Okay, they were celebrating the fact that we had managed to crush the rebellion of 1857. All right, and they were seeing this. Okay, there were articles upon articles being published in British newspapers. There were ceremonies organized to commemorate and celebrate the heroes of the 1857 rebellion. Heroes meaning people from the British side who had managed, to quell and crush the rebellion. Okay, they were celebrating this. Now India House was one such organization or one such community. Okay, now since they were there, okay, they simply, and especially with Vinayak over there, they could not just simply see this happening. They had to do something about it. Okay, they could not see this vilification of their own heroes in front of their own eyes. Okay, so guess what Vinayak did? They organized their own ceremony. Okay, a grand counter celebration. Okay, they changed, or they presented a counter narrative. Okay, that they were the martyrs of 1857. They celebrated the people, okay, such as Rani Lakshmi Bai and all the other people. Okay, I'm not able to recall all of their names right now, but yes, the people in India House, they organized a ceremony and they celebrated it. Now, this was something that was not taken lightly by the British. Okay, if you live in our land, you need to abide by our own political narrative. So imagine this situation that you are in Britain, you are celebrating the heroes who managed to crush the 1857 revolution. But here is a community of people who are celebrating the martyrs, who are celebrating the fact that those people died while resisting the British rule. Okay, this was something that was not taken lightly. Okay, there were some newspapers and some media, things that were published all across newspapers that was not taken lightly. And now the British, they had become conscious about the fact that, you know something has to be done for this. Something concrete has to be done to shut or stifle Vinayak, or at least stifle his thought, or to the very least stop this proliferation of revolutionary ideas from Savarkar to back home in Bharat. Okay. Now, by the time this event of 1857 made him think, okay, if this is how British are interpreting the events of 1857, okay, he needs to do something. He needs to write the wrong narrative. So what did he end up doing? What did he do? He managed to write a book on 1857. Okay, he toiled hard. He had to get, some readers pass in one of the libraries, keeping in mind that he was in the limelight. The British were watching him, the intelligence agency, everyone was watching him. But despite that fact, he managed to get a reader's pass of one of the libraries. He read whatever literature and whatever records were there in the British libraries relating or regarding the 1857 revolt. Majority of them were from a white person's perspective. But yes, he absorbed all of this in record timings, and he came up with his own book, okay, relating to the 1857 essay. Okay, he wrote this essay, he finished this book. Okay, he managed to send it across. That book was titled as The Indian War of Independence of 1857. Okay, it was written in Marathi. It had a Marathi title as well. You know why? Because majority of the people who were reading Savarkar were Marathi speakers. Okay, so he also translated that book in Marathi as well. All right, so now what was happened was, uh, since that book was sent back, okay, that book was sent back to Bharat, nobody was willing to publish it, because anybody who published it, that would directly invite the ire of the British. So what they had to do was, after making multiple efforts, since nobody was ready to publish it, the book was sent to Paris, Paris, France. Nobody was willing to publish it there as well. Then book ended up in Germany. This is the original manuscript we are talking about. Okay, hardcover papers written, because there didn't exist anything such as Google Drives or digital mediums, no internet as well. Okay, so this was original manuscript written by Savarkar himself. So first it went to Bharat, nobody was willing to publish it. It came to Paris, nobody was willing to publish it. Then it ended up in Germany. Germans, since they were pretty much interested in, Sanskrit scholarship, and it was a center of Sanskrit scholarship at that time. Still, nobody managed to publish it in the German press as well. Finally, the book ended up in Holland, the Deutschland. Finally, the book was printed by a press in Holland, even after multiple warnings as well. There were multiple warnings given. But yes, book was now being printed in Holland. And what did the British do? They increased their security at the Indian ports. They did not want these things to come in. We don't want the seditious literature or these things to come in. So finally, when the book was printed, you know, yeah, but it was banned. The British saw it, what capability that this book had, and they banned it. Okay, it never saw a day of light. Interestingly, when Vinayak met Bikaji Kama in London, he handed over the original manuscript, one of the original manuscripts, to Madam Kama as well. Okay, now Madam Kama had kept it in a bank, in a locker in a bank. Now that bank was destroyed, that copy was also destroyed, but some other copies existed as well. Okay, a few decades later, Bhagat Singh had the fourth edition of this book secretly published in Bharat. Okay, imagine the writings of Savarkar had also managed to inspire Bhagat Singh. Bhagat Singh was reading what Savarkar had written. Okay, Bhagat Singh got that copy published for people to read. Now, why would he do that? That is something for you to think. Okay, his writings might really have some convincing power for people. So yes, Bhagat Singh publishes it in India, but during one of the police raids, okay, Bhagat Singh wasn't exactly a friend of the British. So when the British raided their centers, these copies were captured and destroyed. Okay, so British did make active efforts to make sure that nobody reads these thoughts that Savarkar had. Okay, even Subhash Chandra Bose and Rash Bihari Bose, all these peoples, they also got these things printed in Japan as well. Okay, so his writings had, you know, uh, waves. His writing made waves. People such as Bhagat Singh, Subhash Chandra Bose, Rash Bihari Bose, Madam Kama, all these people were reading his writings. So it clearly might have had something of substance. And the British, they were hell bent on banning this book. Okay. In the further parts of the series, you will learn what trouble Vinayak gets into, for writing this book. Okay. That's it for this episode of the character sketch of Vinayak Savarkar. Okay. Do check out our other, our other video series, that is Unlearning the Falsehoods. We have put out 34 episodes of Unlearning the Falsehoods. You'll find it in the playlist section of our YouTube channel. That's it for this episode of the character sketch of Vinayak Savarkar. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for joining.